myth exists within Islam today. A myth which suggests that nothing before Islam is important, even that there is no history prior to Muhammad. Not only does this myth deny the existence of other religions, it denies the existence of philosophy, denying knowledge itself. The myth is used to curtail all debate, to censor any alternative views within Islam, to censor any critique of the powerful within Islam and within Islamic countries. Despite claiming the very opposite, this is very much a minority view within Islam today. Not only does Islam build upon Judaism and Christianity, Islam owes a massive legacy to Neoplatonism. Neoplatonism originates with the Greek philosopher 424 to 348 to 7 BC. Neoplatonists are the later followers of Plato. Indeed, neo simply means new. Followers whom sought to explicitly explain Plato's philosophy, even resurrecting it from the skeptics and the Stoics. Despite resurrecting what they believed to be true Platonism, they were much more concerned with spiritual aspects of Plato. Plato himself can be located in the Hellenic tradition, which suggests that humans do not have understanding, but participates within it. That our mission is an attempt to understand that which is truly real, as opposed to what we call reality. The use of irrationalism and even magic begins with Plato himself. He emphasised dream work. Plato tells us that Socrates listened to a daemon, a voice that prevented Socrates from certain actions. In Symposium, around 202 to 203 BC, Plato has Demotia place daemons as intermediaries between gods and mortals. In doing so, daemons are positioned in special religious and magical roles. Given that Alexander the Great's conquest of the East, there is the suggestion that such Platonism was later developed and influenced by Buddhist thought, a tradition of nothingness or pure metaphysics, in sharp contrast to Plato's student, and indeed Alexander the Great's teacher, Aristotle, who emphasised logic and empiricism, a tension which repeats itself in Neoplatonism and indeed within Islamic Neoplatonism. As a branch of Platonism, it's ever evolving. It's therefore wrong to talk of a founder of Neoplatonism. But we cannot overlook the incredible contribution of Plotinus, and by implication his teacher, Ammonius Saccas. Although none of these early Neoplatonists would have recognised the term Neoplatonism, only Platonism. Ammonius Saccas, 175 to 242 AD, was an autodidactic Hellenistic philosopher from Alexandria. Although his true origins are disputed, some believe he may have been Indian. If this is true, it would certainly explain some of the uncanny parallels between Neoplatonism and Indian philosophy. It's worth quoting a hadith: "Seek knowledge even as far as China. Predictably, a minority of Muslims are so offended by this hadith that they even dispute its authenticity. Plotinus, circa 204 to 5 to 270 CE, was a philosopher in the Hellenic tradition, from Hellenic Egypt, certainly spending time in Alexandria. He was an ascetic and a vegetarian, leading a simple life. Stories of his life would suggest that Plotinus had very strong spiritual powers. Indeed, he is said to have had experienced a union with the One. He saw nature itself as magical, but had no interest in magic, only philosophy. Certainly, some might consider him a guru or even a prophet. The Enneads of Plotinus are the primary document of Neoplatonism. The Enneads explain that the One, or goodness, is the animator of the universe, but not the creator. The One is unknowable, the One is all-powerful. Because the One is unknowable, there are no adequate ways of describing it. Indeed, even calling it the One is too descriptive, because it cannot be described. Because the One cannot be described, there are a series of animations which help us to conceive of the One and the universe. The original being initially animates the nous, which is the perfect image of the One, the archetype of all existing things. It is simultaneously being and thought, idea and ideal. As image and nous correspond perfectly to the One, but as derivative, it's entirely different. The nous is the highest sphere accessible to the human mind, whilst also being pure intellect itself. The image and product of the nous is the universal soul. The image is immaterial like the nous. Its relation to the nous is the same as the nous to the One. It stands between the nous and the phenomenal world and is permeated and illuminated by the former. The nous, spirit, is indivisible. The universal soul may preserve its unity and remain in the nous, but it has the power of uniting with the corporal world and thus being disintegrated. It therefore occupies an intermediate position. A single universal soul, it belongs in essence and destination to the intelligible world, but it also embraces individual souls. These can either allow themselves to be informed by the nous or turn away from the nous, choosing the phenomenal world, losing themselves in the realm of the senses and the finite. The soul, as a moving essence, generates the corporal and or the phenomenal world. The world ought to be so pervaded by the soul, and its various parts should remain in perfect harmony. As long as ideas govern matter, or the soul governs the body, the world is fair and good. But in the actual phenomenal world, unity and harmony are replaced by strife or discord. This results in conflict, the becoming and vanishing an elusive existence. The reason for this state of things is that bodies rest on a substratum of matter. Matter is indeterminate with no qualities. If destitute of form and idea, it is evil and capable of form. It is neutral. Evil is a parasite. Having no existence of its own, it's simply in an absence of good. Indeed, evil is more about the distance of the human from the One than an objectively defined act. And all this reflects the basic view that the universe is essentially good and therefore needs We need a way to explain evil. Suggested within this is a celestial hierarchy. But this is simply an abstraction to help us comprehend, for the one cannot be comprehended. In fact, rather than beginning with the run and moving downwards, Plotinus always begins with what we see as the physical and moves towards the one. In fact, when we take away all that we know, only then are we left with the one. This hierarchy is non-temporal, i.e. there is no time and no space. So there can be no hierarchy as we conceive it, because there is no beginning nor no end. How can one sphere animate another when there is no time? But then even this is a simplification, because below the level of the moon, things do have the appearance of being temporal. Indeed, the one is within everything, so all is indivisible. To be able to describe the one would require a level of duality, when everything is in fact non-dual. So the universe is a single living being containing all living beings, and all living beings can influence each other. Human perfection and happiness are attributable to this world, without awaiting an afterlife. Perfection and happiness can be achieved through philosophical contemplation, as all people return to the one from which they emanated. So the soul is pre-existed and is immortal. Therefore, there is a concept of reincarnation. The human soul consists of the lower irrational soul and the higher rational soul, or the mind, both of which can be regarded as different powers of the one soul. The soul possesses an ability to return to the one after death, and after death the soul takes up a level in the afterlife, corresponding to the level at which it lived during its earthly life. Indeed, this concept of inner-outer aspect applies to all activities within Plotinus's scheme. The most pure and holy souls will dwell in the highest regions, and the impure soul will undergo purification before descending again to be reincarnated into a new body or even a plant or animal form. Plants and animals being further removed from the one. A soul which has returned to the one achieves union within the cosmic universal soul, and does not descend again. But yet again, even this is an abstraction, because we cannot know the one, and there's no time and space. So what is death and returning to the one? Maybe the only way to conceive this is that it is entirely within our consciousness, as there is no temporal plane. Henosis is the word for mystical oneness, union or unity in classical Greece. In Platonism, and especially Neoplatonism, the goal of henosis is union with what is fundamental in reality, the one, the source, or the monad. Plotinus therefore includes mental or psychological states within metaphysical levels, turning away from the physical world to achieve this oneness by moving up these psychological states. Plotinus therefore offers the opportunity to understand the true self by stopping the identification of the human body. Hence his asceticism, as the body and its pleasure is unimportant, even a hindrance to oneness. Therefore the descent of the soul into the body is an inversion of the true self. The body is therefore a perversion of the soul. Porphyry, circa 233 to 309, wrote widely on astrology, religion, philosophy and musical theory, but he's best known for his biography of his teacher Plotinus. And indeed it was he who compiled the Enneads. Iamblichus, circa 245 to 325, influenced the direction taken by later Neoplatonic philosophy. He compiled a compendium of Pythagorean philosophy. The Iamblichus system, the realm of divinities, stretched from the original one down to the material nature itself, where the soul ascends into matter and becomes embodied as human beings. The world is thus peopled by superhumans influencing natural events and possessing and communicating knowledge of the future. These are accessible by prayers and offerings. For Iamblichus, the human soul is separate not only from the intellect and the gods, but from all the other superior classes of souls, angels, daimons and heroes. In De Mist, Iamblichus argues that the view of the gods, against the view that the gods have ethereal bodies, daimons, aerial bodies, and human souls, earthly ones. Amongst other problems with this conception is the result of gods and daimons would be permanently separated from humankind in another circumscribed area of the cosmos, and so theurgy would be impossible. Iamblichus introduces the doctrine of divine illumination, which allows gods and the superior classes to effect rites on earth without actually descending or coming into contact with matter. The god or angel shines its ethereal light on the world below and thereby fills it with its power. Iamblichus has salvation as his final goal. The embodied soul was to return to divinity by performing certain rites or theurgy, literally divine working. We can therefore see Iamblichus as complicating the original cosmos of Plotinus. Based on the Chaldean oracles, in contrast to Plotinus or Porphyry, Iamblichus turns his full attention to theurgy, and therefore ritual and magic. Indeed, Iamblichus almost develops a theory of sympathetic magic. Proclus Lyceus 412 to 485 elaborated of a level of individual ones called henads between the one, which is before being, and intellectual divinity. The henads exist superabundantly, also beyond being, but they stand at the head of each chain of causation, Sirai, and in some manner these give to these chains their particular character. He identifies them with the Greek gods, so one henad may be Helios, and may be the cause of all sunny things. Each henad participates in every other henad according to its character. In the elements of theology, Proclus begins from the existence of the one, the divine unity, and ends with the descent of the individual soul into the material world. So he therefore specifically wrote about magic and magical theory. Philosophy is the activity which can liberate the soul from a subjection to bodily passions, remind it of its origins in soul, intellect and the one, and prepare not only to ascend to the higher levels while still in life, but to avoid falling immediately back into a new body after death, before the soul's attention, while inhibiting a body, is diverted from its origin in the intelligible world. Arabic translations of Neoplatonic works were readily available to Islamic scholars in Greek following the conquest of Alexandria. Because Liber de Causis was originally attributed to Aristotle, its authorship being unknown but could be Porphyry or Proclus, it was originally seen as Aristotelian philosophy. There is also an influence from the Sabbateans, a pagan sect whose transcendence theology contained many Neoplatonic elements. But like so much of Islamic science and philosophy, these were translated in the House of Wisdom in Baghdad by Al-Kindi and his colleagues. Many Islamic scholars, including Ibn Sina or Avicenna, Ibn Arabi, Al-Kindi, Al-Farabi, Al-Himsi, adopted Neoplatonism. Islamic Neoplatonism adapted the concepts of the one and the first principle, the one without transcendence, to Islamic theology, attributing them to Allah. Allah is therefore a transcendent entity, omnipresent and inalterable to the effects of creation. And nevertheless, to a degree, Islamic Neoplatonism, in common with Christian Neoplatonism, simply ignores the unintelligence of the one. So much of Islamic scholars' contribution concerns locating Allah within the Neoplatonic cosmology. Indeed, because the Hellenic philosophers had a pantheon of deities, they saw the nous rather than the one as God. But for Muslims, there can be nothing above Allah. So the one, or the first principle of the one, is Allah. To a degree, this somewhat reintroduces a hierarchy to the Neoplatonist cosmology. But often the same constraints apply, especially those Muslims accepting a non-temporal or non-dualist approach. I need to say, however, to an extent this is semantics. If it is non-temporal, the location of Allah is not important, for he is everywhere and nowhere. Furthermore, this is really a Western hegemony to call Hellenistic gods. Indeed, it is much an attempt to assert the superiority of monotheism over polytheism, a hegemony that is also very vocal in Islam today, without ever really contemplating what polytheism actually means. Al-Kindi's Allah has four faces or aspects. Doctrinally, he is classically rooted in and derived from Al-Quran, and bears such epitaphs as the Creator and the Active from the 99 divine names of Allah. Allah has an essential unity which does not derive from anything else. He also has Aristotelian aspects. He is, for example, unmoved, but of course all Al-Kindi's deity is much more than a mere mover. Firstly, we can detect a Neoplatonic influence on Al-Kindi's thought. He was the first major Islamic philosopher to reflect significant aspects of the Neoplatonic tradition, and is a link to the thought of philosophers such as Al-Farabi and Ibn Sina. Al-Kindi took his view of the solar system from Ptolemy. In one of his treatises on the subject, he says that these bodies are rational entities whose circular motion is in obedience to and worship of Allah. Their role, Al-Kindi believes, is to act as instruments for divine providence. He furnishes further empirical evidence as proof for this assertion. Different seasons are marked by particular arrangements of the planets and stars, most notably the Sun. The appearance and manner of people varies according to the arrangements of heavenly bodies situated above their homeland. Al-Kindi says that the soul is simple, immaterial substance, which is related to the material world only because its faculties which operate through the physical body. To explain the nature of our worldly existence, he is borrowing from Epictetus, which compares it to a ship which has, during the course of its ocean voyage, temporarily anchored itself to an island and while allowing passengers to disembark. But the implicit warning is that those passengers who linger too long on the island may be left behind when the ship sails again. Here Al-Kindi displays a stoic concept that we must not become too attached to material things represented by the island, as they will invariably be taken away from us when the ship sets sails again. He then connects this with the Neoplatonic idea by saying that our soul can be directed to the pursuit of desire or the pursuit of intellect. The former will tie it to the body, so when the body dies it will also die, but the latter will free it from the body and allow it to survive in the light of the Creator, in the pure realm of intelligence. Al-Kindi was strongly influenced by Proclus and sees the Henad largely as corresponding to Malaika, angels. So Malaika are given special tasks by Allah, but have no free will. This was further developed by Ibn Arabi, who even suggests that all beings have an angelic identity. Ibn Sina sees all conditioned realities as emanating from the unconditional realities, or God. Abu Nasr Muhammad Al-Farabi, circa 872 to 950-951, in contrast to Al-Kindi, believed metaphysics was concerned primarily with being qua being, that is, being in and out of itself. This is related to Allah only to the extent that Allah is the principle of absolute being. Al-Farabi's cosmology is essentially based on three pillars: Aristotelian metaphysics of causation, a highly developed Platonian emanational cosmology, and the Ptolemaic astronomy. In his model, the universe is viewed as a number of concentric circles. The outermost sphere, or first heaven, the sphere as fixed stars: Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, Venus, Mercury, and finally the Moon. And at the centre of these concentric circles is the sublunar realm, which contains the material world. Each of these circles represents the domain of secondary intelligences, symbolised by celestial bodies themselves, which act as casual intermediaries between the first cause, in this case Allah, and the material world. Furthermore, they are said to have emanated from Allah, who is both their formal and their efficient cause. In this Ptolemaic cosmology, which is found in so many books in Islamic science, or magic if you like, is the Ptolemaic cosmology which provides the divine timing to rituals. Inspired by Neoplatonism, Al-Farabi developed a cosmological hierarchy. For Al-Farabi, human nature is composed of both material and spiritual qualities. The spiritual part of human exchanges information with angelic entities, who are defined by their nature as knowledge absorbed by the Godhead. Al-Farabi comes close to providing an explanation of co-creation by animation from one to the material. The material. This is explained by each intellect giving rise to each heaven until we reach the 10th intellect and the earth. The lowest in the material realm, a composite of matter and forms. A similar function is attested in the cosmology of the Muslim philosopher Ibn Sina, who however never uses the term angels throughout his works. For Ibn Sina, the intellects have probably been a necessity without any religious connotations. The chain of beings, according to Muslim thinkers, includes minerals, plants, animals, humans, angels. Muslim philosophers usually define angels as substances endowed with reason and immortality. Humans are animals are mortal, but only men have reason. Devils are unreasonable like animals, but immortal like angels. Ibn Arabi described Allah as being like a pure white light. This light white travels through a prism and divides into what we know as colours. These representing what we convince ourselves is a reality. But in fact it's an illusion and is a refraction of this white light. Of course, these illusions are not the same as Allah, but are made from nothing but Allah. Love is seen as the utmost essence of Allah. Indeed, the only reality which can exist. Only through love can man find a oneness with Allah or uniting with Allah, by realising that we were actually Allah all along. Suhrawardi builds on the concept that the world of reality is a darkness, furthest removed from the one. Suhrawardi's cosmology of light takes the Neoplatonic cosmology to a different level, with white light providing the glue that seems to be missing in so many descriptions of the Neoplatonists' cosmology. Suhrawardi employs both allegory and didactic language to advise how to follow the Sufi path, often with specific instructions regarding aesthetic practices. Suhrawardi, similar to Ibn Arabi, uses symbolism from nature and animals to offer a spiritual hermeneutic or tawil, which begins with discursive philosophy but ends in gnosis and the spiritual return of man to his original abode. Reality is made up of light and grades of light, but grades, not different types of light. Only the lowest and the dimmest is what we associate with material light, and these different grades are immaterial light, barriers or substantial darkness, accidental light and dark accidents. So our goal is to illuminate ourselves by getting closer to Allah, even at one with Allah, having first reached the material world. Indeed, the soul is a direct manifestation of the divine light, i.e. Allah. So we do this by purifying ourselves. For Suhrawardi, only through seeking knowledge can we find this illumination. Indeed, having found the light, that is all that matters, including our paths and the scriptures, as closeness to Allah is the only thing that matters, and this comes from knowledge and not doctrines. In his visionary cosmography, old Hermetic Platonic cosmos, he describes a Platonic cosmos of 7 onion-like spheres which dissolve and vast spiritual universes revealed to the latter generations of Sufis. Abstract concepts of Lahut and Nasut, designating metaphors for divinity and humanity, develop into fully fledged worlds or dimensions of existence, quite similar to quasi-animationist worlds of Neoplatonists and even the Kabbalah. Suhrawardi imagined 2 more worlds between physical Alamil-Nasut and divine Alamil-Lahut, imaginable or subtle world. So a 4th emanationist universe was conceived in his cosmology. The 5th world was equated with the unknowable, Allah's essence, unnamed Alam-il-Lahut. Suhrawardi describes a previous existence for every soul in the angelic realm before its descent into the realm of the human body. For him, the soul is divided into 2 parts. One remains in heaven and the other descends into the human body. The human soul is always sad because it's been divorced from its other half. It therefore aspires to become reunited with it. The soul can only reach contentment again when it's united with its celestial part, which has remained in heaven. He argues that the soul should seek contentment by detaching itself from its tenderest body and worldly matters and access the world of immaterial lights. Neoplatonism is the foundation of all Western mysticism. So Islamic philosophers have used the framework of Islamic mysticism in their interpretation of Neoplatonic writings and concepts. Therefore, we can see Islamic Neoplatonism as informing Sufism, although as always this is disputed by some Muslims, or at least the extent that this can be considered Neoplatonism, although I have to say some would even deny that there is such a thing as Sufism. Rumi divides the intellects into universal intellect, Akil al-Kuli, and a particular intellect, Akil al-Juzi, whereas the universal intellect attends to the affairs of the divine room. The particular intellect's scope is restricted to this world. Jabir Ibn Hayyan, or Gerber, the translator of Hermes Trismegistus' Emerald Tablet, was avowedly Neoplatonist. Ikhwān Al-Ṣafā, the Brethrens of Purity, also the Brethrens of Sincerity, were also distinctly Neoplatonists and influenced the Shia Ismailis, whom to this day are openly Neoplatonists. Ismaili Nāṣir-i Khusraw, 1004 to circa 1072, made a major contribution to a Muslim understanding of Neoplatonism. For Nāṣir al-Khusraw, the science of the soul is the way to attain real knowledge, a knowledge which transcends the difference between the perceiver and perception. And he says, between the knower and the known, there lies a distinction by one who has awakened from sleep of heedlessness. But to see Neoplatonism as simply confined to Sufism or Ismailism marginalises Neoplatonism, in the same way that Salafis seek to marginalise Sufism. And Hanbalism gradually marginalised the acknowledgement of the contribution of Neoplatonism to Islam. Therefore, Neoplatonism's desire to help Muslims unite, and therefore Neoplatonism's desire to help Muslims unite with Allah, has been marginalised by the powerful in Islamic countries' desire to control dunya. Maybe rather than banging on as I'm prone to, we should allow Rumi to have the last comment on this issue. The animal man, who by deceit and cunning knows the intricacies of science, of geometry, of astronomy, medicine and philosophy, which are concerned with this world, is barred from finding the way to seventh heaven. All those sciences are fit for building a stable. They serve as columns for the abode of camels and cows. Their purpose is but to let the animals survive a day or two. And yet, these imbeciles call those sciences mysteries. Neoplatonism was largely lost to the West with the burning of the Library of Alexandria, and then the banning of Neoplatonists by Emperor Justinian from the Byzantine Empire. This suppression was followed by the Western Church during the Dark Ages. And the Neoplatonists found refuge in Damascus, and with it this Islamic Neoplatonism which kept it alive, eventually returning to late medieval and especially Renaissance Europe. However, it'd be wrong to assume that the tradition was completely unknown in the West during the Dark Ages. Rather, it was an occult wisdom. Neoplatonism has remained one of the most salient features of Islamic philosophy, performing two functions: the intellectual and the practical, both of which have become an integral part of living a philosophical life. Philosophically, Neoplatonism provides answers to the most major questions within the context of Islam, such as how multiplicity came from unity and how corporality emanated from an incorporeal Allah, as well as explaining the ascending and descending order of beings. Despite being hidden from Islamic theurgy, it remains an incredibly important component of Islam today.